Okay, thank you very much, Penn. So we have about 10 minutes remaining for the panel. We'll do questions now. I'd ask the panelists to come up in the interest of time. You're right here, and there's a microphone circulating. So once you guys come up, and then we'll just use this rather than sit at the table. Okay, you just stand right here, or you can sit. I don't know if there's enough seats, but I think use this microphone so they can.
We can bring them enough seats. Yeah, we got it.
So Sarah, you have a question, and then right here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you so impressive. I have a question for Staci, and I know that the focus here is sort of local, but like what you've done in Massachusetts, especially with the trains, is so impressive. But also having shown the accident in Canada, so it reminded me that we had similar accidents in the U.S. And to what extent the approach should be not only state by state in terms of having the right kind of but approaches to have some kind of national transportation law that actually would afford the protection that we have here in Massachusetts.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think this is a really interesting issue, and I think there are ways to tackle it at a state-by-state level, but certainly the federal government is the one who has the majority of the say over what happens on the rails, so I think action does need to happen federally. I wish that ACE had the resources to tackle this at the federal level. We just don't. I mean, we're really small. I know what we've tried to do is connect with other grassroots groups. Like there's an issue in the Albany area and then out west in Oregon, and we've sort of tried to make initial connections, but we just don't have the resources to do that. So I think it's going to be up to other people, researchers, maybe bigger organizations to tackle it, because honestly, there's been a couple new proposals that we're fighting against, and that's part of the EJ movement. I feel like we're trying to get to the point where we're, deciding what we want to see in our neighborhoods, and we're working toward that, but we're still constantly having to fight back against something horrible and big, and the people on the other side are multi-million or billionaires. It's like these multinational companies. So, yeah, I think it can happen both at the state level and federal level, but we need more resources, and if you have ideas to help, let me know.
So I just wanted to follow up on a question to Penn and also to Steve. I thought what you had to say, Penn, was very right on as far as thinking about the structure of universities, and it really echoed the cautions that Steve left us with about the role of academic institutions. But I also have this question about how local our academic institutions actually are. I came from a background of doing my PhD at MIT and looked a lot about the process of seismic imaging and how the development and structure of seismic imaging really laid the groundwork for the boom in hydraulic fracking and the structural asymmetries between rural communities across the US. And so our universities truly do have a global reach as far as the impact of our engineering and our design. And so I'd love to think about how we can also think about building for that global reach, and how do we build responsibility around that global reach, particularly with this example of oil trains. Like we know oil trains are a problem all over the place now with the boom in shale oil extraction. And I would love to see us as universities embedded in building networks that would pull together communities who are dealing with that same problem but don't have the capacity to, go travel over to Wyoming and teach about the band that you've managed. So I guess I'd just love to hear from you examples of how we can think about a grounded global reach for responsibility in our academic endeavors.
I really appreciate the reminder that there are global fights to be had, and our universities play critical roles in that. So I'm not trying to say it's an either or. I think it's a both and. I think, and if you, in referencing MIT, I was there as an undergraduate, and my entire time there, even though we were about 2 miles from Dudley Square here, never crossed the line. And so I think that what I see is sometimes the universities that really are taking a lot of space in kind of the global sense, they're doing a lot of really, really great stuff globally and with a justice angle and all of that, but then locally there's no connection. I mean, fracking is not a great example because it's not happening right here, but if you were to say another example, where there was a local instance, then then you could actually bring that together.
You get the alternatives in the context.
To answer our question, I would focus have a super focus on the local level, and then build your way upward. Because if your base isn't strong, then it can crumble down on top of itself. And also, this may sound radical, but even something is like letting someone sit in a class for free, and then that person being able to just disseminate the knowledge to other people in their communities. Like the lady from UMass Dartmouth, who's on our board, offered to let me send it on a semester's worth of her classes, and like I said before, just like how that goes against like me. That's me not having the resources to take extra classes is like, it's not the biggest step in the direction, but it's a small step. And also just getting creative. I want to give you a solid answer, but just think outside the box. That's all I can say. I'm sorry.
Well, I had the question. Thank you for awesome presentation. I loved everything that you said, and I want to get back to Penn later because you're researching something that I am doing, but I would like to ask these not-for-profit organizations, because I'm also working with my community collaborators. How do you find your researchers and academics? How do you connect with them who are not in this room, who buy into it? Have you any experience on connecting with people outside of environmental justice movement, or somebody so actively looking for some expertise that you need but you don't have? And then how do you, this is the second part of the question, that is little what Steve said at the end, was that how do you make sure that there is an equal partnership, so that there is not this structural arrogance which is not intended but comes with the way our political system is built? So those are two.
Sure, I'm going to add something to what you said. I think, like as part of what we had said in our presentation is that sometimes geography can play an interesting role, right, in how institution and local community come together. So I think for us, we were fortunate in the sense that people were in really close quarters and shared initiatives. So I think sometimes it can happen organically in that way. But what I found interesting in my few months working with EJ League is kind of the amount of requests that we get for participation. So, or I guess it's the other way around. So we've had a class at Brown that wants to work with us in the fall. We have multiple work study students that reach out to us and say, can we be a part of your work? And it's interesting because a lot of times I don't actually think they know what the work is, but there's something quote unquote sexy about it. But I think that's something very real to kind of address, is that which way is this going? So I've almost found that in my time in EJ League that, like I said, we're getting a lot of requests for people to come in from Brown in particular and work with us. But I don't think we actually have, solidified what the most valuable role is for academic institutions to play with us where we're at now. So I don't know. I guess it's not really an answer, but I think it's an observation that's been interesting for me at least. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say ACE has partnered with a lot of different academics, and we've gotten better about having databases that sort of track contact information for people. But I would say certainly in my last few years at ACE, there's been some areas of knowledge that we didn't have, and we had to go outside of our usual circles. So it was more of a networking. We just talked to the people we knew and said, could you recommend somebody else, or is there another group that could help us out on that? So it's not really a science. It's just kind of going out and talking, and certainly doing conferences like this. We're always looking to recruit new people so that we can call on you for help. And I will say, we were a bigger staff in about 5 or so years ago than we are now. And I think ACE used to be more active with institutions, and the requests were overwhelming. They continue to be overwhelming. And really the requests that we're able to accommodate often are ones where we're saying, we really can't do what you're asking, but here's what we need. Do you feel like there's a synergy and you can play in and plug in that way? And that's where it's tended to work out. I will also say that back in Penn's time, heading up ACE, the organization decided to start doing toxic tours. So instead of us going out into classes and lecturing, we started saying we give tours of the neighborhood of our perspective of what's going on, and we asked universities to pay for it. And our assessment now is that it's actually not worth the time that it takes to get those going. So we actually think we're going to not be doing those as much, because they're great and they're fabulous, but we really want people from the neighborhood to be on the tours, and we're just spending so much time giving them. So anyway, it's some answers to your question.
Hi, my question is for Jesus. I'm right here. I'm from the University of Louisville. I'm a nurse scientist, and I've been doing some work with e-cigarettes and their environmental impacts, ultra-fine particles, fine particles. And I love your work with youth and kind of opening their eyes to the system with the food justice you're doing. I was wondering if you've been able to tackle e-cigarettes as an emerging threat and on the foundation that you've already built with food justice.
It's funny, I laugh because recently we've been working with the Department of Health on e-cigarettes, and we have the World Tobacco Day coming up, and we're doing a park cleanup next week of cigarette butts and going around and picking up different things. But yeah, and even in the office it was because personally, when I went to school, people would be smoking the vapors and in school and right next to me, and and they're just smoking, and they're no, there's no secondhand smoke, there's no, and it's hard for me to believe that. So I did do some research, and I did get to go in and look at it's actually more hazardous because the aluminum and all that's inside of the e-cigarettes. But yeah, so that's the work that we've done around it within doing the park cleanups, or we even participated in a Zombie Day march that we did in Rhode Island with a bunch of it was 250 high school students who actually came out, and it was the effect of e-cigarettes and smoking and vapors, and a lot around new legislation around vapors, because there's a cultural lag on the effects of what happens.
Thank you.
No problem.
Can't give me the mic before, but this is just to your point before, back to what Staci was saying. I really recommend that everybody go and look at your the ACE guidelines for working with researchers. I had the fortune to work with, I play a few different roles. I live in an impacted community. I'm an environmental sociologist, and I work with community groups as a researcher, so a scholar activist role, I guess, up in upstate near Buffalo, New York. And one of the things that I did with our local Clean Air Coalition of Western New York is draft our scientific research policy. So any researcher, any intern, any class that wants to work with a community organization has to agree to those guiding principles. So it's not either side is being used for that momentary research or time or whatever that is. So that's been really, really helpful. And ours has kind of served as a model for other groups in our area, so that either side feels taken advantage of. So that was great to point out. That you have that on your website. Everyone can take a look at that for a really great model.
It was a great panel, and you really look beautiful because you're so diverse. I think that's something that makes it a very, very important message. My question is to Jesus, and it's concerning. I heard you when I was on the bus yesterday that you used the bus for Pride Day,
Yeah.
and also that you work with LGBT rights. I was wondering, as an activist in this area myself, do you confront any obstacles, any difficulty combining these different sorts of activism within your work?
I can say that, like, since I've been in active, I've gotten a lot of hats, and like I work at many different organizations that, like, from like LGBTQ to like EJ League to like police brutality and it's always such a hard way. Like, for the longest time, it was like, am I black? Am I gay? Like which one am I more? Like, which one do I have to fight for? Which one? And it's like right now, I'm actually reaching that point of like finding those intersections, and a lot of it, I feel like we still need to work on like building those intersections and making the space so that we can build on those intersections and actually like bring these two different communities together and find. Because definitely, I feel like all these issues are interconnected, and we just a lot of it is just finding those places. But yeah, definitely, I'm in that like world of like I'm trying to like put it together, especially because I work with so many different organizations. I would love to have them all at one table for like on that issue. No problem.
I think we have time for one more question.
This question is about how to reconcile the environmental movement with the environmental justice and the economic justice movement. I've been working for years on economic justice, and now I'm an organizer of the environmental movement / environmental justice. Now, when does environmental white guilty people who want to be working in the ghetto don't know how? Where does environmental justice meet environmental, and how do we get an ally? Get the white environmentalists not wanting to pay stipends to bring people of color to their conferences, but want to go to actions in frontline communities and give money to those organizations. But there's an issue now where there's an emergency right now concerning Spectra Energy and new infrastructure, fracked gas coming up from Pennsylvania, which is getting established with a compressor station in Weymouth and a compressor station in Burrville, Rhode Island, where studies say people 3 miles away get chronic illnesses. Now this is real. There are explosions are happening all over the country all the time. Eventually, all these pipelines will explode. Eventually. Hundreds of people have died. Billions of real estate dollars have been lost due to these explosions. It's coming right here. It's coming to Boston. Now, we need the help of ACE, and we need the help of John Burroughs and any connections we have to the mayor, because they are framing the struggle in West Roxbury as moving. We're going to move the pipeline. Everything will be cool. You know where they're going to move it? You know what communities they're going to move it closer to? Well, this is upon us now. Bulldozers are starting to dig up the streets in West Roxbury anytime now. Equipment's going to be moved in at any time, and I know ACE is totally overwhelmed. But how do we? This is an emergency. How are we going to get us working with ACE and with City Life and other groups and them becoming part of this struggle? Because the moment of truth is upon us.
Thank you for that. The short answer is I don't know. I will say ACE has received a number of requests from groups around this issue for the last a year or so. And one of the issues that we have is that we are, as you've noted, overcapacity, completely under-resourced, and we're trying to maximize who our resources do go to. So for us, we have eligibility guidelines for the groups that we work with, so people need to have, the average income of group members needs to be below a certain income threshold. There needs to be people of color involved, and the people most impacted need to be leading the campaign. We've had some tensions over the years with groups who are it starts out with a couple of white middle-income folks who say, here's the issue, we're going to bring in some people of color, and they end up being tokenized. The people of color, they're not really actively engaged, they don't know enough of the issues, they're not leading the campaign, they're not making the decisions. So for us at ACE, that's how we can bring these different movements together is where it's really the low-income folks, the low-income people of color who are at the forefront of making decisions. That's one way that ACE might get involved in this issue. And I will say, we're starting to ramp up a new campaign on displacement and anti-gentrification in Roxbury. And Northeastern is potentially on the other side of this, by the way. And that's taking a ton of resources. So we're trying to figure out, like, this is sort of where we want to be going as an EJ organization. And do we really have time to be dealing with some of these other issues? That doesn't quite answer your question, but there's a lot to be worked out.
I could definitely.
Go ahead.
So now, sorry, I have to definitely adding on to like what Staci said. Even within like the EJ League itself, its board originally was made up of a lot of white middle-aged, mainstream like environmental movement ideal, and we had like our youth programming, and we had like a youth board, and then we had like the EJ League board, and it was, and this happened the past summer where we was like, who actually gets to make the decisions, and the youth board are the ones that are doing all the work within like going out teaching folks. They're at the forefront of all these issues because they live in these neighborhoods where they're concentrated, where it's concentrated pollution and whatnot, and so they're dealing with these issues. And when it came to make some finalized decisions, it was like, who actually got, because we ended up being on two sides of the coin at this time, where we was like, no, we want this, and they were like, I don't think we can do this, and it's like, no, we want this, we need this, this is what it is. And then it came down to the question of who's actually making the decisions and who's actually like leading that movement, and what that movement looks like, and like it should look like us. It should look like the people who are actually dealing with the issues that are going on. And so now like we ended up going with like a whole new staff board turnover, and now there isn't a youth board. There's a youth committee, but the youth are now part of the board. Now I think it's like 60 to like 70% of our board is youth. Like, but yeah, if that's an answer to your question.
Okay, so we've run out of time, but I'd like everyone to join hands and thank you, our panelists, for